Hey guys, for today's video, we're going to talk about the application development and emerging technology. Now we will discuss the basic workflow development in web application. There are common tools that use for creating web applications such as text editor, version control system, and web browser. Text editor. It is the one of the most useful and powerful tools within your toolbox. This is because it is simple and small text editor program capable of handling codes readably by different programming languages. It is also highly significant that the text editor you choose must provide the facility for you to access your file system faster and easier. The text editor we will require doesn't really need too much feature in formatting text. It is rather better if it has a lesser features for us to manipulate it easier. There are also development programs like Xcode, Eclipse, and Visual Studio Code that have a feature that can allow us to create, or alter different codes. There are two basic essential classes of text editors that use in development of modern web application. The first one is Graphical User Interface Editors or GUI editors. It is visually create, modify, and train a neutral or neural net. The second one is Terminal Editor. Terminal Editor used during the time when GUI hasn't been so popular and used yet. Sublime Text. Sublime Text was a mainstream text editor with a few extraordinary features for web development. It has the preferred position of being a cross-platform, which implies that it should work generally. Similar where you utilize Mac OS, Windows, or even Linux. There are benefits that you'll get in Sublime Text. There are a lot of functionalities such as split editing, command palette, multiple selections, plugin API, and many more. Sublime Text also is a user-friendly text editor that utilizes a notepad-style approach. Next is version control system. Version control is a cycle that permits you to keep work checkpoints in our code so that you may always generally load back of it. Not Notwithstanding that version control is a fundamental tool for working together with different developers, or we can say that it is a practice of tracking and managing changes to software code. There are numerous highly accepted version control are accessible, and most of them have their own specific features and subtitles. A few common examples include CVS, Mercurial, Perforce, and Subversion. Get is generally utilized version control system that has a command line interface. Get is a software for tracking changes in any set of files, usually used for any usually used for coordinating work among programmers, collaboratively development sources, code during software development. Next is browser. Browser is an application used to access and view websites. Chrome is an amazing internet browser for a web development purposes. Next is structure. HTML or Hypertext Markup Language is an innovation that permits us to determine the structure or of visual components of a web application. It is also a formatting system for displaying material retrieved over the internet. HTML used to create electronic documents that are displayed on the World Wide Web. Each page contains a series of connections to other pages called hyperlinks. Every web page you see in the browser was written using one version of HTML. Tag versus content. As you're writing, you may observe that document comprises two kinds of content. One sort of content is typical text content, like my first web application and hello world. The other kind of content, as HTML and head, is contained by angle brackets, and we allowed to these components as tags. Tags are type of metadata that and has metadata utilized, and this metadata utilized to apply structure to the content of the page. As you can see here in the image, tags don't show up, and yet the other content does. My web application here is the content shows up as the title, and the hello world content shows up as the body of the window. P is for paragraph. If you want to insert a paragraph, you just only add this p tag inside the body like this here in the example, and the result is like this. Comments are advantageous method reference on our HTML. We begin an HTML comment using this, and it ends as a remark like this. Usually, comments used to explain a portion of more confusing code. Like, for example, here in the example picture, there are comments here that explains what is the main heading and the main paragraph, etc. Headings, anchors, and a list. HTML headings are titles or subtitles that you want to display on a web page. HTML headings are defined with the H1 to H6 tags. H1 defines the most important heading, and the H6 defines as the least important heading. Next is anchor. Another important tag in HTML document is a tag which represents anchor, and it is used to make joints. The anchor tags are a novel characteristic of hypertext since they can connect to other information either on the present page or element. The document object model and trees HTML tags characterize a progressive structure called the DOM or document object model. The DOM is a method of presenting an object which can be characterized through HTML and afterward communicated with by means of a scripting and language such as JavaScript. HTML tags characterize DOM elements, which are substances that live in the DOM. Observe that this graph makes better presentation of DOM. It likewise explains a portion of connections we allowed to DOM elements lower to the tree as descendants of the DOM elements higher in the tree if there is a connection that links to them. Immediate descendants are called child elements, and the elements on top of child elements known as the parent elements. Next is validation program. It is a set of instructions that naturally verifies whether your code adjusts to certain fundamental guidelines. The last topic is style. CSS or Cascading Style Sheet. CSS is a style sheet language used for describing the presentation of a document written in a markup language such as HTML, or in other words, we defined it as a style for our web pages, including the design, layout, and variations in display for different devices and screen sizes. Rule set is essentially an assortment of style rules applied to some subset of elements in DOM. In CSS, there are two different ways to indicate colors. The first is with CSS color names for generally utilized colors. The subsequent method to determine color is with hexadecimal color code. A hex color code comprises of 6 hexadecimal digits, 0 to 9 or 0 to 8. CSS comment is alike as the HTML comment. CSS comments are code explanations that are totally disregarded by the browser during the execution. Padding, border, and margin. HTML elements are shown in one of two different ways. First is inline elements. It is a main way which applies to elements that have the type A or span. Block element. This implies the content enclosed inside the element will show up on the another line outside of the typical progression of text. Padding property signifies the spacing between the content of the element and the border. Margin is the spacing between the element and its encompassing element. And lastly, the border property that signifies the space between the padding and the margin. Selectors. Selectors is a pattern of elements and other terms that tell the browser which HTML element should be selected to have the CSS property values inside the rule applied to them. Classes is a group of elements that are the same or similar. You can have as many elements as you want in a class. Pseudo-classes are used to add styles to selectors, but only when those selectors meet certain conditions. Cascading rules. Cascading rules is the order of CSS rules matters when two rules apply that have equal specifically. The one that comes last in the CSS is the one that will be used.